for me, communication is a form of self-care. And so when we're not actually doing the optimal communication that we could for ourselves, and that also includes silence. For me, communication isn't just about verbal, it's also about the nonverbal and the energetics and things like that. When we don't have the communication that we know is possible and that we're capable of, it's like we're undermining our health, because it affects our finances. How are we talking about money? It affects our mental, emotional health. It affects every aspect of our health. So we actually, I feel like it contracts how many years we have on this planet in a healthy way. Like, yes, we might have our body here, but is it going to be as healthy as it could be, given how we communicate about our health and how we're taking care of ourselves?
Welcome to Alignment Adventures. This is a podcast where we explore what it means to live a fulfilling, aligning, and present life. I'm your host, Lindsay Tanner, and I am so grateful that you are here. Hello, my loves, and welcome back to Alignment Adventures. I am so excited and so grateful that you are here. We have another beautiful interview with Siris Raquel. I love this conversation. I mean, don't I love them all? I'm so grateful I get to do this. I do not take a single moment for granted that I get to talk to these beautiful souls. But Siris Raquel has such an interesting background from the logical and the pragmatic to the energetic. And I just love how she brings it all together and packages it so beautifully. But Siris is a life coach, speech language pathologist, has a background as a learning behavior specialist, feeding therapist, and does therapeutic energy work. So like I said, she just brings together all these different modalities, which she talks about in such a beautiful way. And she really tunes into like what each person is needing to like bring them what they need. And I just really appreciate that, because as you may or may not know, I could be a person that's like all this way or all the other. Like when I see how some of our systems are not always serving our highest good, I'm like, down with modern medicine, let's go all to energetics. And we need both. We need to find the bridge between both. And I just think Siris is such a great example of that. So we discuss all the things, but we really focus on communication. And I love how she reminds us all that communication is so much more than what we're saying. It's what we're thinking. It's what we're saying to ourselves. It's how we're acting, our body language. It's even the silence and the stillness. She shares her journey and how her encounters with chronic pain really led her on this path, and how she really brought in the energetics to her business. Again, showing how we can have both. We can have the pragmatic and the logical, and the energetic and vibrational work, because we need both. And that really serves everyone when we bring those together. Hence why I've been having so many episodes bringing together science and spirituality, right? It just all connects. We talk about relationships. We talk about how limiting beliefs can affect your communication. And she also really hits on the power of connecting with our body and like saying hello to your body, because our body is constantly communicating with us. Now, there is a special offer for you, so make sure you listen all the way to the end. I know you guys are just going to love Siris and her energy so, so much. Siris, thank you so much for coming on Alignment Adventures. I can already feel that this is going to be a powerful, transformative conversation about all things communication, spiritual, all the topics. I can't wait to see where we go today. But thank you so much for your beautiful gift of your energy and your time.
Thank you. Thanks for making the space. And we've already built a rapport over the emails and things like that. So I'm very curious to see where we're going to go today.
Totally, totally. I was like, it's divine timing. Like, this is the right timing for sure. So I'm just going to trust in that. So we'll start off, and you can answer this in any way. And that's what I love about this question, is there's so many ways to answer it. But who is Siris?
Today, because it changes day by day. Today I am someone who is excited and hopeful, which I'm a pretty grateful person overall. I was raised to really not take anything for granted, from just being able to talk and walk and breathe and all these different things. Like both my siblings have special abilities, and we lived in the hospitals with their surgeries and their therapies. So death and things ending and things beginning kind all the time was our constant companion. And in the last couple of years, there's been so many people who have passed in my life that it was starting to erode a little bit my sense of hope for my people. Like I still had hope for myself. It was a little bit harder to see consistently, but I can honestly say right now, since like January of this year, I've been like, oh, I'm hopeful again. Which I didn't realize how much that was an integral part of who I was. I felt like a dialed down kind of like grayer version of me without that, because I was so used to talking about my sense of being a grateful and forthright and honest person. And I never really used the word hopeful to describe me. And today I'm like, that's absolutely, I need to acknowledge that and include it, because when it's not there, oh my God, what a difference it does it make. It just, so that's part of who I am.
I love that answer. I love it. I mean, let's be honest, that's such a difficult question to answer. But I love that you said that because I've noticed that recently too, like that frequency of hope, which it's easy to like teeter off and on of it. Like, especially if you focus a lot on externals and like what's going on, it's all about where you place your intention. But I've noticed that too. Like, and I felt that as well. Like, there are times where I just feel a little hopeless, and that's kind of a scary place to be. But then when you like consciously tune back into it, like it just changes your perspective. It changes everything. So thank you
And
for
one of the
starting there.
things that I've been able to do to shift back into it, like you're talking about, is just like when I was really feeling judgmental either of myself or other people, and I go into gratitude. I'm like, okay, what can I be grateful for about this, or what's right about this that I'm not getting, things like that. Well, with hope, I was like, well, what question can I ask to like pivot from that hopelessness? And that's the other thing, is like, okay, where is the hope in this? Where is the light shining that I could maybe expand a little bit more? Because that's how I see in my head hope is like this shining light. And when you don't have it, you're like, everything seems a little bit darker, a little bit more grim than it could be. And so that's been a helpful question for me to ask myself when I'm trying to shift out of the ugh of it all.
Truly, like that is why so many people talk about gratitude. And I almost am like, oh, here I am bringing it up again, but because it's so powerful, like it's such a powerful practice and frequency to have. And you're right, it's just like bringing color back into your world. And it's so interesting too, hearing people's background and their life experiences. Like you said, the way you grew up and what you saw, like that was such a prominent thing to just be grateful for, like the things that I'm sure a lot of us take for granted, like just the things in our day to day. So I love that so much. I feel like that's a beautiful lead into my second question. So I'm gonna sneak this one in really quickly before we continue on. But what does living in alignment mean to you?
A lot of things. So I talk a lot about living, but I see living really differently than most people. So I see living as the conscious choices you make to add things, either energies, people, places, spaces, tools, strategies, inspiration, ideas, whatever you're adding to your life that's going to create more. And when I say create more, it's really including you and anyone else that you're connected to, which, given that we're infinite beings, I feel like we're connected to everybody. But even if you don't have that perspective and it's just like your own little corner of the world, what if like as you're choosing to live, what you're adding, it creates more. Now, on the other side of it, a lot of people don't do this other aspect, which is the dying piece. A lot of people avoid talking about dying. A lot of people see it very differently than I do. And given that I basically have had it as a companion, the possibility of death and dying are two different things for me. So dying for me is what you let go of to create more. And so a lot of people want to add and add and add, and they think that it's going to work while they're still holding to a lot of stuff that isn't serving them, that isn't beneficial, that is if on the worst case scenario, harming them or
Mm,
really, contracting possibilities. And so some examples of the things that I've needed to let go of to create more is I used to have a lot of chronic pain. I was
mm,
chronically ill. And so working on I added the living, I added specialists, I added naturopathic doctors, I added supplements and tinctures and all these different things to create more. And with that, I got to let go of pain. I got to let go of a lot of sickness. I got to let go of allergies and asthma and medications that were just kind of a band-aid to a lot of those core issues that were creating some of my ailments. But there's so many things that we can let go of to create more, like judgment and toxicity, that sadness, that hopelessness. Those are things that if we aren't willing to have the dying, we'll still have that even as we're trying to stumble around to live out here. And it's rough out here some days.
I say that a lot. I'm like, man, being human is no joke. Like, it's an
Choosing to be
interesting
on the
ride.
planet, on Earth right now is an act of bravery every day. It's like I'm so impressed and amazed by people that are still choosing to truly live, not just like go through the motions, but like truly live and be here connected with their body. I think that's the other piece of like living with alignment for me is I'm being in alignment with what my body's telling me continuously. Like I say hi to my body every morning. I acknowledge it as a partner in the creation of my life. Like when I choose what I'm going to eat, when I choose what I'm going to wear, including this blouse for today, my body picked it with me. It wasn't just like, oh, using my head and be like, okay, I wore this the last time I was on an interview. I guess I'll wear it this time. No, it's like, what's going to work today? And I think that's this big piece that where I could easily use the braining, which is so valued. Instead, it's often taken me off track when I'm often just using my very strong, powerful brain. I do have, pretty strong intellect, but there's so many things that we won't even choose because we've never seen it. We've never even considered it. No one that we know has done it or considered it. And so that's when we have to lean into some of those other things that we're getting messages about that maybe our body's telling us, our inner knowing is telling us about. That's for me when we're really living in alignment, when we're listening to all those whispers of the unseen that maybe we can make seen through our choices.
So many good explanations there. I want to pull on all of it. But I think what I really love about what you just said, and it connects beautifully to your work, and what I just want to talk to you about today is like bringing in all aspects. Like you said, you had chronic pain and you took like the Western route, let's say, of like going to doctors or even naturopaths. Okay, that's a little bit more, less heard of now, but I think becoming more popular. But also, you addressed it like energetically. And like you said, you acknowledge your mind, your beautiful mind. Like we all have this mind that can do so much beauty for us and like helps us survive. But then it also can limit us in so many ways because, that evolutionary part. So you're tuning into your body. And I love all of that so much. It's about, I know I personally I get into something and I'm like, I gotta be all that. Like it's gotta be all like down with modern medicine or, whatever. Like it's gotta be all energetics. And that's just not the case. We are multi-dimensional beings. So this leads me into my next question for you. I know you have like an education background, which I also used to be a teacher. So I just appreciate that so much. Like what was the tipping point for you? Like you're in education, you're SLP, you're behavior specialist. Do you feel like you always kind of were tapped into the spiritual aspect of that? Because obviously, when you're in the schools, that can be a very like pragmatic, logical, there's steps you go to school. Was the spiritual aspect always there for you, or was there like a tipping point, or what was that journey like for you, like bringing it all together? Because I think you do such a beautiful job of just bringing it all together.
It wasn't always this eloquent, and it's still there's certain days where I'm like, is this happening? Is this working? Okay, let's see. Because it has to keep evolving too. I think yes, the energetics were always there. I think I didn't have the words for it until I took certain classes and trainings. I was like, oh, this is what I was aware of when I was a kid. Like I was always aware of spirits, I was always aware of entities and the unseen. I thought everyone was, but no one was talking about it. So until I was like, oh, this is something that nobody's talking about because they're not willing to, or because they don't have that gift yet or they haven't tapped into it. Oh, okay. So that was a piece. And I was always very aware of bodies. Both my parents are very sensual and very body aware, being like, my mom was a dancer and we do a lot of Latin dancing with her side of the family. My dad took dancing later on and started dancing more with her when they were married before they got divorced. But then he's an athlete and a coach and he's an artist. So he would always be painting and drawing bodies and commenting on bodies and their athleticism or not, their aesthetics and things like that. So there's always these discussions of bodies and energy that I marinated in as a kid. And so, and they're both teachers. So speaking of, so I was like, oh, that's a reason why we're getting along. Both my parents were bilingual educators in elementary schools. So from kindergarten through 8th grade, my mom did a lot of mostly kindergarten, but all the other grades through 8th grade. And my dad did more of the older grades, like 4th, 5th, 6th grade. And well, in addition to being coaches. So um one of the things that really shifted everything for me was my own personal health. Like if I didn't do something different, if I didn't look at things in a way that no one else around me had looked at it yet, I wouldn't be here to talk to you. I was in my 20s and my doctors, wonderful doctors, allergists, my physicians, I have no complaints about them professionally. It just, what they recommended didn't work for my body. I tried it all. And if it worked, I would be doing that. Cool. But it just wasn't. And so even they told me in my 20s, if you don't do something different, you're going to die. And I didn't want to. Had plans. I still have plans. So I was fortunate that my mom found a naturopathic doctor. This was back in 2006. Okay. That she found through somebody that she knew, and then she was also happened to be a Reiki master. So while I was working on the physiological and a very personalized treatment plan with her, I was also working on the energetics at the same time, because there were certain things that there were no words for. And that's one of the things I love about tapping into energies and using that, is that there are so many things that we don't have words for, but that we're aware of and that we can unlock within us, and that we can invite our bodies to and invite ourselves to. And so it really saved my life. I started the journey of looking at energetics, and with the chronic pain, the Reiki immediately removed the pain I was in, like to the point that I had to like take stock of like, who am I now without this pain? Because it was so much my normal.
Wow.
And then I started learning how to teach the classes myself, and I added on these other modalities like shamanism and theta healing and access consciousness and tantra. And they each have their own personalities. They each have their own vibration. And I still love all of them. I still use all of them. Like there is, and that's one of the things that I think, given that my family is so inclusive, like we have all colors, all hair textures, all eye colors. Some people have freckles, some people don't. Some people are like so dark they're purple. Some people are super fair skinned and get burnt in the sun. And so that really set me up for being like, why would I throw something else out if it's still working? Like I still use all of it. I just ask the person's body or my body, what's the one that's going to work for you, that's going to be ease for you to receive in this moment. And then whatever one is the one that pops up and says, hey, it's my turn. It's my turn. I'm like, all right, let's play. And we go from there. But that was a big piece. And then I kept them separate for a really long time. I kept my energetic work and my trainings with these really woo-woo things over here. And then my speech and language and learning and behavioral stuff over here. I was working in the schools. I was working in homes in early intervention and daycares all over Chicagoland. And then it was my parents that I worked with. It was the families that I was working with that asked me both explicitly and implicitly, hey, could you step up? Could you show us some of this other stuff? Because they were like, we love what's happening. We love how you're working with our kids and our family. Is there anything else you could recommend? And this came up in my world as, oh, well, I could mention this thing that I've been keeping over here that of course I'm doing without saying, because you can't cut off those energies as soon as you awaken them. But I didn't ever show it to them. I didn't actually say, so your child just calmed down when they were tantruming, because as I was doing this occupational therapy tool, I'm also doing this energetic thing, and he calmed down right away. I didn't, until they were like asking for it, I couldn't lie to myself anymore and say that they weren't willing to receive it. Because that's one of the things I was doing. I was like, oh, they're going to not want to work with me anymore. They're going to think I'm crazy. They're going to take my license away. And all of those things were BS. They were, not everybody wants it, but there were way more that were open to it and willing to receive it and play with those tools than I had anticipated. It completely changed my life and my business.
Wow. That is such a cool story. I love how it was born from such like a natural need and something you were kind of just doing naturally already. And then they were asking for more of it. And then what a beautiful example again of the mind coming in and it's like, wait, it's not safe. Like if I tell them what I'm really using here, like I won't be accepted or, that's such a common story for me as well as I dive into all that stuff. So such a beautiful story to see how you like kind of married it all together. And that was a question I had for later on, but feels important right now. Like someone is resonating with your energy so much. Like how do they decide what avenue to take? I think you kind of already explained this, but you said you tune into their body and your body on what are maybe multiple modalities that you're using. Because you're right, that's what I love. There's so many different modalities for the diverse amount of needs that we see on this planet. Like what works for one person is not going to work for another person. So maybe you can explain a little bit more of like how someone knows like which avenue to take.
Um, I think it depends on how tapped in they are to their energetic gifts. I think some people, they find me through social media, they find me through word of mouth and referral, or I don't know, there's just so many different ways that they find me. And depending on if it was a video or a post or something like that, they just like, I'm called to reach out to you. And I'm like, cool, you already are acknowledging your messages that you're getting. You're already listening to your
Yes.
inner knowing. And that, so good on you. That's already a great step. And then some of them just want me to do the work of picking. And then I say, hey, this is the one I'm getting that your body's telling me to give to you today. How does that sound? And I describe it a little bit. And they're like, yeah. And usually as soon as I describe it, like, that's exactly it. Um, and some people I read it out or I give some of the possible examples because it's maybe a tie between two or three. And then after I, out of all the, hundreds of tools, I say, okay, these are the two or three that are kind of coming to mind. These are the different personalities about them. Which is the one that's the biggest yes for you? Because I'm kind of getting a yes for all of them. What's the one that's like, they're like, this one. I was like, all right, cool. So it can be collaborative depending on the person, or it could be where they just want to receive and they don't want to have to do the work. And I think that that's also really beautiful because for people who are healers and givers and educators and parents, all of that, a lot of times they're so busy giving that they just want someone to take care of them for once. They want to be the one that's on the other side. And the fact that they're allowing themselves to do that is such an honor for me that I'm like, all right, I got you. Now that's like a private session type of scenario, but if it's more coaching, all of my coaching is collaborative.
Mm-hmm.
All of my coaching is the foundational thing is for them to tap into their body's yes and no and their inner knowing. And so at the beginning, there's more support and there's more of me doing some of the legwork to model the
Yeah.
tools that they're getting, but then they're going to be learning them themselves so that they can use it. So they need practice doing that. So after a while, they need to start looking into their own awareness and answering some of those things for themselves and getting those messages and acknowledging them. And then we say, and then they often will say, I got this. Is that what you got too? And I was like, yes, I just got it in this different way. And it doesn't mean that yours is worse or mine's better or anything like that. It's just we all get the pieces in a different way. And it's important for that person to know how they uniquely receive the messages. And it doesn't matter who it is. If it's a parent that's working with me or if it's an individual, I work with couples too.
Mm.
And it's so curious to see how one person's way of learning, communicating, and receiving messages, how it intersects with the other person. Oh my God. It's like one of my favorite things. You can see it go click, 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 and it hit into place. And then you're like, yes. And it creates this cool big picture together. You're like, and this is your relationship, or this is your family. How cool is that? And for them to get to see it and acknowledge it and be like, oh, I really know myself. And wow, I do know you even more in a different way now. It's it's so awesome. It like lights me up.
I can like literally see how much it's lighting you up. I was just thinking about that. If people are watching, like you can just see how much it excites you and lights you up. And it is perfect lead in to something I really want to pick your brain about as you're working with people, especially families, caregivers, the children, like you really get to see it all. Communication is such a big part of like our day to day and how we interact with those. Like our relationships are everything to us. And I feel like we don't always realize how well we're communicating or, how we could improve that. So what tips do you have when it comes to like communication? It kind of feels like we're going in a different direction now, but like what tips do you have to help us be more effective communicators that really support this journey that we're all on to just live our most aligned lives?
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because, like you were saying earlier, for me, it's all kind of mixed together. It doesn't seem like a departure at all in our conversation to talk about communication because I'm like, what is an energy and bodies and communication? Like everything is energy, bodies, and communication, but that just might be my weird perspective on that.
No, you're
If,
right. You're right.
if a big part of it is starting from how you communicate with yourself. How are you
Mm.
listening to yourself? I think one of the things that are my unique gifts that I've always been able to do, even since a little kid, is to hear what people are saying when they're not really hearing what they're saying. I'm often the one, even now in my family life and in my relationships, that are like, "Did you just hear what you just said?" Now listen and pick up on the implications that of what you just said, like the rippling out of it. Like, how does that? What are you telling yourself with that? What are you telling to this other person when you're saying it that way? And so that's one of the first things is like, how much are you really present with your words? How much are you really present with your body? Because that'll affect you being clear on what you need to improve on or not. Like if you're not monitoring yourself, how are you going to monitor how you're communicating with somebody else? How is it landing and being received or not? If you're not really with you. So that's one of the first things that I often am looking at with anybody, be it a parent that's trying to advocate for their child and support them, be it an individual that's looking at their own sense of joy and self-care and their communication skills. It's like, okay, what is working? Where are you present? Where are those situations and the people that it's easier for you to be present with? Where it's easier for you to be authentically you? And where is it a little bit messy, a little bit crispy, as my mom likes to say, when you get a little bit that friction?
Mm,
Like I love the word
hmm.
crispy and how she says that because it kind of feels like there's like that rubbing raspiness when something's like when something's not quite right and you're like, uh-oh, did I just offend somebody unintentionally? Like did I hurt their feelings? Like there's that it's crispy.
I
Uh
love that.
just make sure to give my mom Sulma Verdejo Carrion credit for that, like I do, and we'll be good.
I will.
Anytime.
I love it. Yeah, I might put that in my back pocket. Crispy. This feels crispy.
And also it depends on how aware the person is of themselves in general. So sometimes people need to get feedback from somebody else before they know where are the places in their communication that they can improve. And there's so many aspects of communication. So what a lot of times I usually start with, well, what would you like to have more clarity and ease with in any area of your life? And then we look at, okay, what role is communication or your body connection playing in those areas? And then we can see where the strengths are and then where the challenges are.
I love that so many things come back to like starting within first, because I feel like that a lot of times that's not our natural instinct. Even though it probably is our instinct on some level, it's not always like the first thing we go to when we have an issue. Like, can I go within first? And here's that spiritual piece coming back with like back to this concept of whatever you have going on within you that's usually reflected out to your relationship. So, like how you're talking to yourself and listening to yourself is reflected out into the people that you love the most. Love that so much. And yeah, when you're describing crispy, I can like even picture in my mind, like I have relationships that feel so flowy and expansive and so good. And then, of course, you have the relationships that just feel crispy, as you said, or like forced, or just like there's always this like kind of unseen tension. You just don't, you can't put your finger on it, but it's just there.
It is there.
So I feel like you've touched on this a little bit, like observing what's working and what's not working, but what can we do with those relationships that just feel crispy? We're going to use your mother's words.
Love it. She'll love it. I was like, Ma, I gave you credit. I mean, she's just such a huge inspiration on so many levels. I'm often mentioning her in almost everything that I do. There was something that you mentioned earlier that I'm trying to remember that was also connected with this. Like when you're trying to improve on these more tense or more contractive relationships in your life, I mean, one of the things is that I like to look at with it is, well, what role is that person playing in your life? If and does it enhance your relationship to yourself or detracts from your relationship to yourself, that
Mm,
relationship? So like, do you feel more like yourself around them or do you feel less like yourself around them?
mm.
And it's not a 100%, like there's no 100% is a lie, like, but if is it more times than not where you feel at ease, where you feel like you can say whatever and not be judged about it? um I don't know about you, I'd love to know, like for you, for me, I've gotten a point in my life where, at least in my personal life, but even also clients, I turn away clients where they're not grateful, where they're not open, where they're not doing the work because I'm busting my butt for them. So if they're not going to do the work, I'm not going to keep working with you. Like it's just a thing. So the same thing goes with my personal relationships. If it's not just reciprocity, but there's also like where both of us are just as invested, where both of us are the reaching out to each other. It's not just always me calling or me visiting, and then when do you visit me or when do you call me? It's there has to be a ping pong back and forth there. that that's one of my criteria. So one of the things I like to talk about with people, and I got this through a coach of that is a wonderful mentor of mine, Corey Michelle. She talks years ago, she used to do this really great class called The Art of Living Crazy Possible, something like that, or the Art of Crazy Possible Living, something like that. And in one of her modules in the class, she would go through, she would talk about energetic priorities. And so one of the things I like to do with a lot of my clients, and I always give Corey Michelle credit for this as well, is to actually look at what are your energetic priorities out of the relationships that you'd like to have. And then with this person that might be things are a little crispy with, how much of those energetic priorities are actually there? And
Mm.
if it's not there, is there a way for you to facilitate more of it to show up? Are they willing and able for that to be a thing? Or is it just part of who they are? That's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And really looking at, is this something that you're hopeful for, but you're ignoring who this person is? Or is it something that they just haven't been exposed to, or you haven't had the right discussions yet that would have that show up, that would plant the seed for it to start to bloom as you water it, as you do the things and the work to have it come about? So that's some of the things that I like to look at, but really not assuming, not coming from the assumption that that person even needs to be in your life, period. And it doesn't matter if it's
Mm.
family, if it's coworkers, if it's someone that you're in a relationship with, there are no have tos with any aspect of this. And when you start from, oh, if I really knew I had total choice, would I still choose to be in a relationship with this person? I think a lot of people don't start there. They're already trying to fix things
Yes.
and tweak things. And I was like, wait a minute, is this actually somebody that you would really like to have? If you had a blank slate and you just met them for the first time today, would you still choose that? And that's a hard question. It's not always comfortable, but I
Yeah.
think it's very much necessary so that you're including the people and the relationships that are actually going to expand your world and nurture your body and make sure that they are like having you show up as more of you. Like when when you're with somebody and you're around somebody and you feel like diminished
Mm.
afterwards after an interaction with them,
Yeah.
not fun.
Yeah.
And then think about that, extrapolate that over the course of years or decades with somebody. Whew, I'm not going to diminish myself. And this is coming from years and past relationships and past friendships and past professional dynamics where I was doing that. And it was part of what was causing the chronic pain and what was causing the anxiety and the depression and the chronic illness that I had. And so I work way too hard to still be here on this planet to then choose that again and risk my health. I'm not doing it.
Mm.
How about you? How is that for you when you have or around somebody that's crispy? What do you do?
Well, everything you said was just so powerful. For me personally, in this time and space, I do try to have that mindset of like, okay, this is like an invitation to go within myself. Like, what what is this relationship teaching me about how I can show up as a better like listener or communicator? But it's also true, like what you said, as we grow and evolve, like things just change and shift. And I love that so many things you mentioned, like that there's just possibility. Like you said, nothing is a have to. I always say I hate shoulds. Like nothing is a should in your life. Like you should have this person in your life.
That's a
So
toxic word. Yeah, I agree.
yeah, it's just, but sometimes you have to use it, but I try to eliminate it as much as I can. I love that idea of just like the blank slate of like, because going back to what you said in the very beginning, you get to choose your life. You get to choose what you do, who you're around. And I think a lot of times we think we're just like victims to these circumstances, or like I have to interact with this person, or I have to be in this career with these people that like drive me crazy. And there's so many things we have choice over. And back to another thing you said about like our mind wanting to fix this is where I'm at. Sometimes I encounter a relationship like that. I'm like, how can I fix it? How can I help them? And then I have to remind myself, okay, we're all on our own path. Like they have sovereignty, they have their own choices. Maybe they in this lifetime aren't here to. I find myself getting frustrated and angry. I'm like, this stuff's so fascinating to me. Why isn't everyone else like interested in like becoming, their most aligned selves or like being on this path? But that's not the point. Like everyone's on their own path. So those were beautiful reminders for me. My job isn't to fix everyone. And certainly not everyone wants you to fix them. That could
Nope,
be that
that's
could
true.
start a lot of things. So I love that tough question because it's good to ask yourself those tough questions and get uncomfortable. If you had a blank slate, like would this relationship serve your highest good? It's such a good place to start.
Finally said this other thing that I was trying to remember from earlier, so I don't want to
Yeah.
forget. I'm sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt you, but
No, no.
love that you said, and you said it again, so thank you, of checking in with yourself. Like, I think that that's the other thing that a lot of people don't do is they don't give themselves permission, or they didn't have the models of somebody being like, let me have a moment for a second. I want to just check in and ask myself some questions. Like for a lot of people that work with me, either their family experiences, their relationships, or their job, like there's certain thing about them that put this pressure on them to always have to respond quickly, to always be doing, to always be responsive, and not really embracing the power of the pause is what I
Mhm.
like to call it. There's a power in the pause where it gets shorter, those pauses, what to tap into your inner knowing, into the messages from your body with practice. But as you're excited to learn how to flex that muscle, it can take as long as it takes. And what if we allowed ourselves to be like, hey, let me get back to you on that, or I'm not so sure, or when do you need to know by this, versus I have to answer right now, I have to tell them yes or no right now, and or I have to know all of the everything right now. And it's like you might be getting messages and more information if you just hold it up for a little bit. There's certain things that like we use other people's timelines and deadlines and we put it on ourselves, and it's can make things so all of a sudden you get down the road months or years from now and you're like, how did I get here? Because you didn't
Yes.
pause when you were starting to receive those messages, or they were starting to come through, but you let somebody else's timeline, their power tripping, their hidden agendas, whatever it is, force you into answering faster than you really needed to. And so thank you for that, because that was the other piece with that as well, that I was like, ooh, I love that you said that.
I love when it like comes back around because I'm like that too sometimes. I'm like, it left me. But so true. Like the power of slowing down. As you were saying all this, I remember a specific example. We were having a conversation with our neighbor, an uncomfortable conversation about like this fence we're trying to put up and like property lines and all that. And I could feel the recovering people pleaser in me just wanting to like fix and like resolve the uncomfortability and be like, no, like we'll figure it out, blah, blah, blah. Reflecting back on the conversation afterwards, because I was with my husband too. I was like, I should have paused a lot more. Like, I just kept talking when it wasn't necessarily appropriate for me to like keep trying to fix the situation. And sometimes we want to beat ourselves up for that, but I try to remember, okay, that was a beautiful lesson, Lindsay, to do
Growth moments.
yes, to do exactly what you were just talking about. Like pause and be like, okay, we'll think about what you just told us and we can get back to you on like a solution that works for both of us.
And I can
So
hear
good.
some people like just energetically, I can tap in and people are saying, I don't want to slow down. I have to, there's too much to do. I can't slow down. And what people don't realize is that when you really embrace and have the power of the pause, it makes things faster. Things show up faster because you have that alignment, like you talk about, of, oh, this is what's actually true for me and going to work for me. And this is what's not true for me and not going to work for me. You get that faster and faster and faster when you front load some practice on the pause.
Yes.
It's not actually like going to slow down the results. It's not going to slow down like your ability to receive things. If anything, I think it speeds things up because there's so much information in that quiet, in that silence, that is going to be really impactful and helpful to you if you're willing to listen to it.
Totally. Like the paradox of slowing down is that it helps you speed up. You explain that so well. And it just things are a little backwards from what we perceive them to be. And that's the beauty of this work and like diving into this stuff is you can remember that and be like, okay, it's safe to slow down. So thank you for explaining that. Now I just have so many questions for you around communication. So is it okay if we stay there for a little bit? Because I feel like that is
Rein
such
me in because I'll go all over the place. Yeah, go for it.
no, I love it. Oh, I was looking at all the beautiful questions I had, and I just feel like that is like your area of expertise, and communication is can be so tricky sometimes. So I would
Yeah.
love to hear your perspective on like earlier we talked about like the things we need to let go of, the things we need to let die, which I loved your explanation of that. Maybe it's the Scorpio. I would say the Scorpio in me. My husband rolls his eyes. I love to let things go too. How do those limiting beliefs and like our emotions as well, because we're always like emoting in some way, affect our communication? I'm sure in a massive way.
Yeah, there's really not like any way that it doesn't. I mean,
Yeah.
so, one of the things that I do with my coaching clients, the individuals and the partners, like, it's either couples or triples or things like that, is we go through a list that I have found to be the most reoccurring, prevalent, limiting patterns.
Mm.
And in our first session, and one of them, funny enough, that you mentioned earlier is fixing, saving, helping. When you go into fixing, saving, helping unconsciously, when people aren't asking for it, when they're asking for it verbally but not energetically.
Mm.
When people are just like, do I look nice in this top, and they're asking but they're not really wanting your true opinion, they just want you to say you look amazing, they'll get it.
Mhm.
uh
The
we
validation.
Yeah, exactly, and that's perfectly fine. So when we ask those questions, it's like one of the things that when you're functioning from those limiting patterns, you really put your foot in your mouth more often than not. You feel like you're not either respecting yourself and honoring yourself or somebody else, or both, more often than you'd like. There is this piece of it. It also erodes our confidence. Like, one of the things that affects our confidence the most is how we talk to ourselves, how effectively we're communicating with other people, and how we talk about what's possible and what about with our futures, our currently and in our futures. And so all of that, when we're having these limiting patterns, affects that at the
Yes.
very basic level. So, one of the other patterns that comes up a lot, and is one of the listed things that I go through with clients, is lying to yourself. If that's a pattern of yours, if you're lying to yourself, then think about it. You could be saying, "Oh, I'm not enough," or "I'm a piece of shit," or "This person's mad at me," when they may or may not be mad at me, or what I was doing earlier, where, "Oh, it's not going to be safe for me to talk about this energetic stuff. It's gonna jeopardize my career." That wasn't true, but it's a lot of conclusion, and a lot of us, we lie to ourselves with conclusion instead of empowering ourselves with questions. And
Mhm.
the question to get the awareness versus a question to like get a certain answer. So I think that these limiting beliefs and these limiting patterns really impact how we communicate on those things, but also, and I'm just kind of getting this as we're talking, so I really appreciate this question because I haven't been asked this question before in this way. There, I think that for me, communication is a form of self-care. And so when we're not actually doing the optimal communication that we could for ourselves. And that also includes silence. For me, communication isn't just about verbal, it's also about the nonverbal and the energetics and things like that. When we don't have the communication that we know is possible and that we're capable of, it's like we're undermining our health because it affects our finances. How are we talking about money? It affects our mental, emotional health. It affects every aspect of our health. So we actually, I feel like it contracts how many years we have on this planet in a healthy way. Like, yes, we might have our body here, but is it going to be as healthy as it could be given how we communicate about our health and how we're taking care of ourselves? It's just it's really is life and death for me, communication. And I know that that's might seem a little bit weird.
No.
But that's part of why I'm so dedicated to people having more of these tools in their arsenal, because I'd like for the people who would truly like to live and thrive to have this in their repertoire. And those that aren't really as interested in living and they just kind of want to go through the motions, like, do you? Like, I respect that as well. But I suspect that there are so many people that are really asking for more and they just don't know how to get it, how those little tweaks in communication, how those little tweaks in their language or in their choices can have this really expansive impact in their lives.
So well said about communication, pun intended there. It's so true. Like thinking about something I commonly say, and I know this is like what your podcast is about, choosing your future. I always say, like, you create your reality, you choosing your future. How do we do that? Like, what's the first thing we like are creating? I mean, besides our thoughts and emotions, our words. Like, that is literally creating our life, what we say to ourselves and to each other. So, I agree, and that is such a beautiful way to look at it. It's like a part of our self-care, it's a part of our health. How are we communicating? And that's where it's so beautiful that people like you are in these like more, I don't want to say logical roles, but like the more, day-to-day roles of like SLP behavior specialist and bringing in all this stuff because it's not just it's all of it coming together. So with that being said, what are so let's just cover it really quick. Like, what are some of your top tips for communicating effectively and authentically? Like, if you just had to give some like fast top tips, what would those be for communicating?
Listen more than talk as
Mm,
one.
mhm.
um Say hi to your body and the bodies that you're interacting with before you're engaging. Like I say, when I used to do early intervention, which I would visit homes all over the Chicagoland area, I would drive maybe like 70 miles on
Wow.
average a day,
Wow.
and I would see maybe like 6 to 8 homes or clients a day, because you have to think of the commute and everything between each one as
Mm,
well. It was about an hour each time, so it's a pretty long day. And one of the things I would do before I would walk in, before I would even knock on the door, is just, okay, hi to my body. Because after each interaction, your body shifts too. That's, I think, a lot of people think, okay, I woke up, I can say hi one time, and then my body's just going to be good. But there's, especially when it's an emotionally laden interaction, and special education and families in general have a lot of emotions to them. There's a lot of charge, there's a lot of energies. And so I would look at what shifted after each session, and I would say hi to my body before going into the home. And then as soon as I walked in, I would acknowledge all of the bodies in the home, because sometimes there would be like aunties and abuelo and abuela, the grandmas and grandpas are in the back and they're cooking, and then uncles are like walking through on their way to work and things like that. There's siblings and cousins, and just sometimes you just didn't know who was going to be there when you showed up. And I think that it's a small thing that is easily done, but it can be really powerful to do. I also love people actually acknowledging their strengths in communication. I think that in society, in period, especially if you're a type A personality such as myself, you are trained to focus on what I have to keep working on. What do I need training in? What do I need to improve? Where am I missing? Where am I lacking? And I always start all of my sessions with an acknowledgement of what you do well, what's easy for you, because you can leverage that to then work on the things that are trickier. But if you don't even know or acknowledge what those strengths are, you're kind of going blind as you're messily trying to work on these things that are messy for you.
mm,
You're going to make the mess even messier. So I think some of those things are my recommendations. I also love the idea of receiving from others. Like, it took a lot for me to embrace mentorship and receive coaching and get and go into therapy myself. It really helped me with my mental emotional health, to work with social workers, to ask questions and be like, and be willing to be like, I'm not so sure about this. Because I was the oldest. I am the oldest of the three of us. And I had my two siblings that had special abilities. And then I was navigating parents that were coming from a new culture into the United States. So I was often seen as the person that had to interpret this culture for them. So I had to be an authority at a very young age. I had to be very responsible. And it wasn't really, it's not that they told me I couldn't say I don't know, but it would be like there was just so much pressure to know all
Mm,
the time.
mm,
And
mhm,
then you get into the fields that of education and therapy and all that stuff. And a lot of educators and therapists are, I get it. It's not just the culture and them being type A. It's also they're often punished and they're by their administration or by their bosses and things when they say they don't know something. So
mm.
even if it's just for you to acknowledge, hey, I'd like to learn more about this, and then reach out to people for support, I think that is a courageous. And I think people need to do that more and receive more and let themselves be supported through those things that they're not as strong in as they would like, while also acknowledging the things that they do with ease.
There's so many things you want to say. I'm always like, okay, pick a direction and go, Lindsay. First of all, you're so right with like that teacher mentality. And I think it's for like probably any career. You go into it expecting yourself to know everything you need to know. And you don't, I mean, that's just being human again. We don't know what we don't know, and we're learning as we go. So just like being compassionate with yourself as you learn these new things, we're constantly learning. I also love what you said, focus on what's going right, because I think that's like almost a shadow side of spiritual work. Sometimes it's always like, how can I improve myself? It's that underlayer mentality of like, there's something wrong with me, when really, again, the paradox is that there's nothing wrong with you. It's about coming back to that truth. So, like, I love that you start with that. And then I just want to highlight something you said earlier. It's probably going to be your podcast quote. We'll see when I go back and listen. But you said, instead of telling yourself lies with conclusions, and I may be saying this wrong, empowering yourself with questions.
Mm.
Wow. What a powerful statement. And just even that little snippet alone can foster so much growth and like, you know, just take people so many different places. So thank you. Thank you.
One of my
Now I do
favorite
want
things too is to
to,
brainstorm with someone the questions they can ask that will bring up that acknowledgement of what they know. Like with a parent, what do you know about your child that works? What do you know about the currency that is effective for them versus their other kid versus the other kid that you have? Each kid has
yeah.
a different currency. And where are they communicating with you, where you're getting the messages that you could use to then create the opportunities for them to work on these other things that they're not communicating about.
So, so powerful. Now I want to respect your time. So I'm going to like lightning round these last few questions, and you don't have to lightning round answer it. Take as long as you want to answer it, but I just want to
I'll
respect
be
your time.
succinct. It's tricky for me. I'm quite verbose, but go for it.
I love it. And we need that. We need the deep explanation, the deep stuff. I just want to respect your time. Now, this is, I don't want to say a selfish question, but I do have a young child. So I'm always interested in like, how can I give him the best so he doesn't have to like overcome as many things that we do? Do you
Yeah.
have any like quick tips for children on like effectively communicating? I mean, there's probably so many tips you could have for children, but like being effective
What's going on?
communicator.
You got to give me some more meat to chew on. Yum yum yum.
Well, I'll be okay. I'll give you my example. I mean, Arlo, my son, he's not even 2 yet, so he's just learning to talk. But I just, you know, from doing this work and me seeing like the conditioning that we pick up from when we're little, I know it's impossible to not like give your children limiting beliefs because they're experiencing the world. It's going to happen. I guess like, what can I do to help him have the tools to come back to his truth, or like help him not forget, or if he does forget, how can he come back to that truth? So that was like so many different directions you could go with tips for kids, so take
Yeah.
that where it feels aligned.
No, this is perfect. This is, and it just sometimes what I do, and this is the listening for what's there and what's, the unseen too.
Yeah,
Um, I sometimes just like people to talk and then just see what percolates up. And so one of the
yeah,
things get when I'm hearing you is, what if you acknowledged like where you're aware of what's a yes for him and where are you aware of what's a no for him, and then tell him like, okay, for instance, when I with my goddaughter, when she was born, she was just like only a couple weeks old. I taught her parents, okay, ask her with you, what's your yes, and see what she does with her face, with her body, what you perceive with her energy. If she coos, if she burps, what does she do? If she kind of makes that face, like that one face, you know?
Yeah.
And then, okay, now what's your no? And just see what happens with that. And for some, and it's not too early at 2 to do this. I did it with her when she was only a couple weeks old.
Wow.
And so you get that information. And then when he's choosing certain things, like, okay, would you like a cookie? Would you like a banana? It's like, which one's your yes? And it's like, which, and showing him even now, what's the things that are a yes for him? Because when he chooses the things that are a yes, he's going to get more of those yeses. He's going to get more of the things that light him up, that are expansive, that are yummy for his body, that respect him. And then when he chooses the no, and let him choose the no. If he got
Yeah.
the, let him choose it and be like, all right, you see, you said it was a no, but you chose it anyway. And look at what happened. And that's still also instructive too. And letting him get messy, but having those conversations even now about, okay, this is what mommy's yes is. When something's a yes, it makes me smile. It makes maybe I have butterflies in my stomach, or whatever it is for you. I see the color purple, or I hear this certain sound of, whatever that is. What is it for you? Let's see. What something's really enjoyable for you. What does that feel like with your body? And I kids that young, because remember I did early intervention, so that's birth to 3. The majority of the kiddos I worked with were around 18 months to 2.5 years.
Wow.
Was the biggest chunk. And they can tell you things, or they would go like, they'll do a thumbs up if it's a yes, or they'll go and be like, they'll do certain sounds, and like, until you ask them, you won't know. And it's so cool to see that all the different ways that their yeses and nos show up. Like, I had a kiddo that was super expressive facially, but not verbally. He was not really talking yet. And he was already like 2.5. But he would, if I was like, oh, is that something you'd want? And he'd be like, ah! And he'd do a double thumbs up, right? And if it was something he didn't, he'd be like, oh, like, is there something punched him? He'd be like, so like dramatic, like, oh no. And I was like, wow, that is so clear. Keep that. Don't lose that, kid.
I love that, because that is such a simple practice of, again, getting them tapped into like their own internal guidance, their own yeses and nos, their own wisdom, and they can keep that. They can keep that flowing throughout the rest of their life. And I was just talking about this with my husband, like, even if they choose something that maybe isn't good for them, like they choose like the unhealthier food, that's giving them the lesson of, what does that feel like in my body to consume that or to do this other thing? And then they can make the choice moving forward. So powerful. And also that reminded me that like even young babies are communication is not just words. They're communicating from day one. I mean, even before day one in the womb, always communicating. So,
And one of
so
the things that
interesting.
happens over time is when you have these conversations, you start acknowledging where you're already receiving messages from them. Like, a lot of my parents, they have nonverbal kiddos that have sensory issues, autism, ADHD, ADD, learning disabilities, things like that. And yet they're like, I feel like they're sending me this picture. Like, when they start working with me, they realize, oh wow, I'm getting the picture of what they want, and I'm just doing it. You're just going and you're doing the things, not realizing, oh wow, they're actually communicating with me through pictures, and they might be sending the pictures to these other doctors and therapists, but those people aren't receiving the pictures the way I am. So I'm able to meet their needs more. Now, how can we empower these other people in that person's life to also receive those messages and those pictures, so that it's not all on you? So,
Yes.
right, you don't have that burnout and overwhelm.
Uh, Such a good reminder too of like, communication is the giving and receiving. Like the receiving is such a big part of it, if not even a bigger part. So,
Mhm.
so good. Okay, my last few lightning round questions for you. I shouldn't call them lightning round because that's not what it is. People are listening, they're loving this energy, they want to connect, they want to work with you. What's like the easiest, or not the easiest, but like, what are the different ways they can work with you, or where can they find you, and start from there and tune into their body so they know which one?
Yes. Well, what's the platform that you like? And you can reach out to me through there. Like, I'm on Instagram and Facebook. I respond to emails within 48 hours of getting them. pretty good about that. My email is empoweringlightlanguage@gmail.com, and my website's empoweringlightlanguage.com. And people can send me messages through my website too. Yeah, explore. I have my YouTube channel and I have some content on there that people like to tinker around with and like just get, including my podcast episodes are on there too. I'm in a bit of a hiatus with my podcast right now. I'm about to restart it again, and it was again the pause, the power of the pause for me, because I was dealing with a lot of health stuff with my family. I'm the power of attorney for an elderly parent, and it's been pretty intense, but I think we're finally making some breathing room for more things, because I really don't do anything unless I can fully do it. You know what I mean?
Mhm, mhm.
And so yeah, if you're called on to connect with me, I also offer consultations. I do discovery calls, and if people mention your podcast, Lindsay, then I'll waive the consultation fee. So they, when they're booking it, if they mention your podcast, then they won't have to pay the $75 consultation fee. So that's just a little gift that I'd like to throw out there to your listeners.
I love that so much. And thank you. Thank you. That's such a beautiful gift. And I love that. Like starting there, and then you can see where, your intuition and your body takes you from there. And there were other thoughts I had about that, but they slipped away and maybe they'll come back. So, my next question, I love to ask this. This is like my favorite question to ask people, but I call it your alignment activity. Like, what is one activity you have in your life right now that you just love to do? It brings you so much joy, time and space float away. It could be anything.
Um, Gosh, so many things. The first thing that came to mind was yoga. I've been practicing yoga since I was 15, and I was really
Mm,
fortunate to learn the 7 different aspects of yoga that aren't just the poses. So
yes,
like the diet and the cleanses and all these different things. I think a lot of people don't realize how profound that body of work can be. Um,
totally.
and that's, the mat is like my home. I do yoga everywhere I travel. I grab my mat everywhere. And then also being by water and ocean, especially like ocean waves. I was just
Mm.
fortunate to be in Florida visiting family this past weekend, and I got to go by the ocean, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, more of this, please." So, those are probably the two that, easy, any day, let's go.
I love it. And when I ask this question, so many people say something to do with nature. Like you said, the ocean and the waves. And it's just so interesting how that has such effect on our body and like can calm us so much. So thank you for sharing that. I also, out of curiosity, I got my yoga teacher training a few years ago. I think it was back in COVID when we're all just like trying to figure things out. And you're right. I was so blown away by how deeper that practice is than just the poses. Of course, that's what we think of it because that's what we see in day to day, but it's a whole thing with, the 8 limb path. It's so, so interesting. So thank you for reminding me of that. Now, last question. This one can be tricky, but if you just had to give one piece of advice to anyone on this journey, and it can be related to any of the things we talked about, what would your one piece of advice be?
Hmm. The one piece would be to say hi to your body every day, and just hi. I think that a lot of us, is graphic as it, or vulgar as it might sound, just kind of see our bodies as like meat suits.
Mm, mhm.
And we put a lot more value to our brains and to what we're doing and all these different go, 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 and the adrenaline overload. And yes, we can do all of those things, but it'll be a lot easier and a lot more effective and a lot more sustainable if we did it with our bodies instead of at our bodies.
I'm gonna start doing that. Starting tomorrow, I'm gonna do that. I love that because we so unconsciously just like escape our bodies through whatever has happened to us and just like being in the rush of life, we just escape these intelligent things that we are in. You're right. It's not just a meat suit. It's like a machine, more than a machine. It's so intelligent and there's just so much there. So I love, love, love that practice. Adding it to my morning routine starting tomorrow. Love that.
Keep me
So
posted on that. What shows up with that?
I will. I will. Yeah, just checking in and like seeing what's going on in there. I feel like it could be so preventative and so many other things we deal with. But
And it doesn't take long. Like you can literally do it while you're brushing your teeth in the morning or before you get out of bed. Just like give your body a hug and say, "Hi, body. Here we go." And then go about doing it. It literally can be that fast.
I love that. I love associating things with other things we're doing. Otherwise, you might forget it and like your day starts hectically or whatever. Like when you're brushing your teeth or what do you do first thing in the morning? Check in with your body at the same time. But Siris, thank you so much for coming on. This was such a beautiful, powerful, expansive conversation that I know I'm going to listen back to and be like, so many good nuggets from this. So thank you again for your time and energy.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, and if anybody has any questions, feel to reach out. I'll be following your podcast and see if there's any comments underneath our chat. But thank you so much for having me.
I love that. And thank you for being so willing and open to help. We need that and it's rippling out to help so many other people. So thank you. Siris, again, thank you so much for coming on Alignment Adventures. I am so honored to have you on the podcast to share your wisdom and your knowledge in your journey. If you want to connect with Siris on Instagram or really any social media platform, you can find her at Empowering Light Language, or you can go to her website, empoweringlightlanguage.com. Now, like Siris mentioned in the podcast, please mention Alignment Adventures and you can get a free consultation with her. I love how she uses her intuition and her gifts to help you really feel into which modality is going to serve you best. Also, if you're looking for an in-person experience, coming up on June 8th from 10 to 4 in Minnesota, actually in Stillwater, Minnesota. So if you're around that area, you might be interested. She has an Awakening Powers Locked in Bodies class. That sounds so interesting. And I'm sure would be just very beneficial for you if you are looking for more on that. I will link it on the show notes. Please go and reach out to Siris. If you're interested in working with her, follow those nudges, screenshot this episode, share any takeaways you have with both of us on Instagram. My handle's at Lindsay with an A, M as in Michelle Tanner. The best way to support this podcast is to just subscribe and share it with someone else that you think needs to hear this message. So if you are new here, hit that subscribe button. We have new episodes pretty much every week. Sometimes it's solo episodes with myself where I'm just sharing my own alignment journey. And many times it's beautiful conversations like the one we had today. But as always, I'm sending you all so much love, all the highest vibes, and I will see you in the next episode.